Catus, Maximus here. So this was initially just going to be a review of one of these older American-made Makita 10-inch compound miter saws. No sliding, just like a job site compound miter saw. But I decided to compare it against the LS1030N. This would be the LS1040, because there's actually a few subtle differences. Makita is one of the few companies that just puts easy-to-read dates. We can see 9911. Obviously, it's not month 99, so this was made in 1999. Month 11, and it is indeed one of the Buford, Georgia saws. And somehow, magically, I was first noticing that the labels, they just are distinctly different. We have a big black UL symbol there. This is not blackened. And then I noticed this is made in China, and I didn't notice that when I originally reviewed this LS1030N. But this was made in 1999, month 10. There's literally 1 month difference apart. So Makita had already, in the 90s, started taking their cheaper, lower margin products and offshoring their manufacturing, where the more expensive products lasted longer in American, or were made for longer in the US. Now, I've seen online ones that were made in 2011 that were made in China, so it was only a few years difference. But there's, this saw was about $100 more than this one. And they're precisely the same, 15 amps, 4600 RPM, electric brake. And for that $100, you're getting a different table casting, a different fence casting, and a different lower hinge casting. The whole upper body of the saw and the whole frame are the same. And same capacities. They're 10-inch, 45 degrees left, 52 degrees right, and only 45 degrees. Actually, you can go a little bit further, but it is just designed to be 45 degrees. These are like job site miter saws. Pretty tough. They actually are geared down a little bit lower than many other 10-inch saws. They have a little bit more torque. I'm not going to do a cut test of this one. I did do one of this, the non-compound, put a 24 tooth blade in, and there's a few other videos of these, and they really do have some torque. I think they're, as far as power, they're stronger than my Milwaukee that I reviewed a long time ago. That would be this one, one of the old American-made Magnum 10-inch compound miter saws. But this one's like more for finish work. It has a little bit higher blade speed, not quite as much power, but it has like needle bearings on the bed and big bearings that hit into all these notches. It's really smooth running, goes 50 degrees left, 60 degrees right, so wide ranging. Even has a table extension. The thing's heavy and bulky. The back sticks way out because of the compound handle. This one is adjusted where they have a bolt, and they've just twisted the bolt into the boss. I should get at this angle here, so that this handle is designed to where you can just flip it down, bevel it nice and easy, and then flip it back up, and it is nice and secure. I do like this style where we do have jam nut bolts for both the 90 degree, and if we look down here, the 45 degree, and we can even see that the needle is actually right. And this one is pretty accurate, at least compared to a Swanson Speed Square. Of course, I forgot to flip the guard. The Milwaukee has a fence that you have to physically remove. I think it's interesting that you can still bevel it even when the guard's down. I guess that's a smart thing, design choice, so that you don't end up either bending the blade or cracking the cover. But in order to do the miter cuts, this has just a little flip. There's little machined out areas, so when you flip it over, it kind of locks in place. They actually have an interesting metal bit here that goes behind the nut so that the bolt doesn't want to come loose. Prevents friction from moving this from making the bolt want to come loose. So you just have this simple thing, flips over. It's not a big wide flip fence like the Milwaukee has, but it's a lot lighter weight, super simple. And then we move it on over, just lock it with that simple handle, and then of course adjust our, if I can, and that would be the compound cut. Now I do like the guards on these Makitas. They actually work pretty well, or pretty reliable. And they were actually, I think, wise to make it an external guard. The big deal about that is it's easy to put a little bit of oil, WD-40 to keep it running smoothly, in order also to blow it out so it just doesn't want to stick as much. The internal guards like that Milwaukee have a lot of negative comments where you use them a lot and they get clogged up with sawdust and don't want to operate. Where this one's definitely pretty consistent. We can see we're at 45 degrees. That's one of the other differences. The Milwaukee, I believe, will cut at its full 60 degrees at 45 of bevel. But this, when you're at the full 45 of bevel, we can see we've run out of space right there. And so it can only do dual 45. It can't go beyond that. And there's actually two purposes that a compound miter saw serves. One is to do two angles at once. Very common for trim and finish work. But also your cut capacity on a 10-inch saw is about 5.5 inches this way, but you only get about 4 inches of blade depth there. So if you have, say, a 2x6 that you want to put a 45-degree angle on, you can't stand it up vertically because you don't have enough space. But if you lay it down flat, set this to 90 and set this to 45, then you can cut a 45-degree angle into a 2x6 in one go. The big criticism, and a lot of people complain, is that Makita should have had a detent here for 30 degrees, so you got to kind of carefully set that. These saws, there's a variety of accessories, but you know, when it comes to these kind of tools, it's hardly anybody ever buys the special accessories, and they always seem to be like limited edition. When they come out with a saw, they're available for a few years. And this is used, so I'm not sure what it's missing, but we do have provisions for clamps on both sides, where this one only has a provision for a clamp on the one side, and I guess that's just perceived increased safety for doing compound cuts. But there are a lot of other nuances, like the holes are kind of sharp edged. These are mounting holes, so you can put a piece of wood or plastic just to, I guess, help protect the fence. But on this one, they're actually chamfered, surprisingly enough. And then the other thing we'll notice is that there are these thick cross sections on the back of the fence here. And that's why one of the reasons I really like this saw as a general purpose job site saw. It's pretty tough. But I was noticing that it's not the same. This is actually just a bit thinner. I mean, we do have some gussets here, but if we compare this to that, there's actually this one, it's a bit weaker. It's more likely to get dinged up, and maybe it was just part of trying to make the fence a little bit lighter because they have this extra piece. But it is a little bit lighter duty fence, and I was actually kind of surprised to see that, even though they do have a provision for the extra clamp. And another nuance, it's just kind of neat to compare this stuff. There's no videos on YouTube like this. We have like little gussets on this older American-made table. They don't exist here. And then one thing to see in photos, and this was one of the last things I noticed just before I made this video, I was looking at the motors and I thought, well, what do you see here? On the Chinese one, there's these couple little extra vents, which are not here on the American-made one, which actually indicates a separate molding. So this motor housing may have actually been molded in the USA, not simply a, mostly assembled in USA saw, but actual major componentry molded and manufactured. So those were some of the differences comparing these two saws. I guess there's not a lot else to say besides they're relatively lightweight, relatively tough. Oh, I was getting back at the accessories. These holes, there are some accessories were a table extension, were cast aluminum table extensions. Some were like these big kind of wire, just material supports that you could slide out. I know on these they actually had one model known as the 1040F, which had like a fluorescent light, which was actually like really panned being a terrible light, and the way they integrated it on was like haphazard. There's also a special safety version of this where there's a separate like lever, and it mounts in some area down here. I don't know if that's just a Euro version, but there's a safety lever where there's a lockout to where not only did you have a button, a safety lockout for the trigger that you have to press, but a second one just to be able to lower the saw. That could get to be a bit of a hassle. And yes, you notice this one's missing the handle. It actually has a bolt there. These handles, the way they stick out, oftentimes, one, either they get bent, or two, people just trip over them and they don't They end up just removing them and putting in like a little bolt like here, just so it's less of a hassle when they're carrying around to the job site. But I think that's what the big selling point advantage. Now they still make these, and it's like $300 to $350. These saws are still getting pretty expensive. Really recommend buying used miter saws because they're usually treated pretty well. They're just not the kind of tool that has high amounts of runtime, even like more normal circular saws. It's a chop saw. You just don't, the cuts are always just for a few seconds at a time. Not like a portable circular saw where you may be doing longer cuts, much less things like sanders, which you turn on and then run for extended periods of time. Miter saws are really pretty well worth it, but I do like how stubby the back end here. We have the vacuum hookup, and this handle just moves protrudes just a little bit past that. It's really pretty flush, nice and thick and heavy duty, just so easy. And the way they machine that, this thing really bevels just really smoothly. Really do like that quite a bit. And I guess I'll finish it off by talking about the loop handle, particularly if you're at a complex cut like dual 45s. The loop handle is really just a lot safer to be able to just have a nice amount of grip and a nice amount of control to bring it down into the cut. Mainly because miter saws is the type of thing that you're not really using on the ground very much. One like this, yes, because this is something where you'd use, just for basic carpentry, particularly for cutting things like 4x4 and 4x6s, things where 7 1/4 inch saw won't get through in a single cut. But nonetheless, you tend to operate these on a set of sawhorses up off the ground. Which is what I don't like about this Milwaukee, is that handle is just not quite as easy and secure a grip, particularly when you're doing those steep compound cuts. They should have really done some type of different handle, like maybe these cross handles that DeWalt has. Oh, and I should say PS, I just did a video about this basically new old stock Taiwanese Milwaukee 14-inch abrasive saw. This is the type of tool that's made for cutting rebar and metal framing studs, that type of stuff. And this is the type of saw that isn't going to be on something. It's almost guaranteed that this is going to be on the ground when you're using it. And so having a stem handle actually makes a lot more sense because you're standing over it. So anyway, that's my video of the Makita USA versus a Chinese one, as well as kind of an impromptu semi-review of the compound miter saw by itself. We do have our little locks here, which I do like. Anyway, nice pair of saws. Bought them, what was it? It's probably been 4 to 6 months apart, and just, I guess, kind of lucked out. I mean, they're 25-year-old saws, and I did get a good deal. $30 for that. Oh, and I should mention I paid $45 for this one, which is well worth the price. It's actually even in better shape. I mean, the guard's broken. Something happened where it hit the guard and impacted the blade. Guard on this is good. And this thing is just, both of these are just pretty easy to pick up and carry around. They're just not super heavy. They actually are pretty compact. And I think still to this day they're one of my favorite because they are just a basic kind of no-frills saw, just with some good castings and smooth operation with a good amount of torque. That's probably one of the better things about them. So they really do cut well. And heck, even on this one, I paid $45 and it came with a sharp 60-tooth Makita blade on it even. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching. See you next time.